Bonjour les étudiants and welcome to this video. As you know, you're seeing it because either I'm having a baby currently or I've just had her so I can't come to class. So instead, we have this video to help you understand everything that you need to know for ces semaines, which I believe is week 19. So without further ado, let's get started. Now I know that we've talked about imparfait a little bit already, but since it's been a little while, and since I really wanted to slow this whole lesson down a little bit, since the difference between passé composé and imparfait can be a little bit challenging, let's go ahead and go back over what we already know. So obviously we've already learned and are familiar with passé composé. That's part of the reason that we made sure to review it very thoroughly last week. But this week we're going to work on imparfait. Now, main difference between the two, passé composé is something with a defined beginning and end in the past. So, par exemple, a few years ago, I went to Quebec, Quebec City, and so it would be J'ai voyagé au Québec. It is, as you can see, passé composé, and it is something that has a defined beginning and end in the past. I left on a Thursday, I came back on a Monday. That wasn't the plan, but you know, c'est la vie. And it's over with. It happened and it's done. Now with imparfait, it's something that's continual, repeated, or habitual. And so, for example, something that happens every day, including aujourd'hui, today when I'm recording this video, je parlais avec ma mère. I talked to my mom. This is something that's repeated just about every weekday, except for when she or I are on campus. And so because of that, I'm going to use imparfait. Now, the cool thing about imparfait is that in English, we have a bunch of different things that we would say, like I talked, I was talking, I used to talk, I would talk. All of these can be summed up with je parlais, the same word, the same conjugation, which makes life a lot easier. So if you'll remember, to make any verb into imparfait, the first thing we'd need to do is think of the new conjugation of the verb. Then we're going to take off the ONS, and that is our stem. Now, finding our stem is super duper important, so that's why we want to make sure that we know exactly what to do. So, par exemple, nous parlons, we knock off that ONS, and we get parle. All of them are going to start with parle. Yeah, it looks just the same as it does with most of the other things with parler, but you know, c'est la vie. Now this is where it gets a little different. Nous finissons, we knock off the ONS, and it becomes finis. So this is going to be the beginning of every single one of the verbs. Vous vendons, just for something different, take off the ONS. Vend is going to be our word, or our stem. And then, of course, even our irregulars. Nous avons, with avoir, it's going to be have. And then we add all of the endings. Remember, we only have one exception with this verb. Thank God. And so, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But this applies to just about every single verb with only one exception. So, just to make sure we're on the same page, we have parler. And so we know that our stem is going to be parle because we just did it. It was parlons with the ONS. You take off the ONS and you end up with parle. Voilà. Then we're going to add the proper endings. So, je parlais, tu parlais, il parlait, nous parlions, vous parliez, il parlait. Remember, we don't say the ENT. So just to make sure that we've got it all practiced up. Je parlais, tu parlais, il parlait, nous parlions, vous parliez, il parlait. Now we've talked about how to use them in sentences before, but just for a quick reminder, here are a couple examples. First off, j'allais au bureau de poste tous les matins. So I went to the post office every morning. No, I've never done that, though at this point my brother could certainly do that because he actually lives right across the street from a post office, which is pretty cool. But anyways, notice this is a habitual, repeated action, so we're going to use imparfait. Or, mon grand-père disait toujours, l'excès est en tout et en défaut. So, my grandfather used to say, all the time, toujours, disait, moderation in everything, basically. And of course, if that's a repeated action, then there we go. Now, this is definitely not my story, but it's another example. Quand j'habitais avec les Huettes, je mettais souvent la table. So when I lived with the Hewitts, the Hewitt family, and notice, of course, that we have imparfait going on here because it's something that happened for a while. It doesn't have necessarily a real defined beginning and end as far as how we're communicating it. Je mettais souvent la table. I made the table often. So notice that this, since it's a repeated action again, is in imparfait. Now, a couple of random general rules that you will eventually run into potentially. If a verb stem ends with an I, like étudier, you're going to end up with double I's. It looks so wrong. I mean, look at that. But it's correct. Now, you kind of don't necessarily say it super differently, but they do kind of stretch out that E. So it becomes nous étudions and vous étudiez instead of nous étudions, vous étudiez. Very subtle difference. Don't stress out too much about it, but that's something to know. And then the other one is that if a verb ends with a C or a G, the spelling changes just a little bit for all the endings to start with an A. So basically all of the ones except for nous and vous when you come down to it. So notice with the G we're going to add an E in between the G and the A. Pourquoi? Because it helps out with the sound. So je mangeais or nous mangions. Notice that we kind of say the E a little bit. That's why it softens it up. The same with C. We're going to make it a cédille for everything except for nous and vous. So, elle commençait, nous commencions. Again, it just has to do with pronunciation because of the way that the C could be said. So, just a couple of quick tips, nothing to stress out about. And then finally, être is our irregular, but it's not hard. Yay! We just have to remember this is our stem. It's not going to be E accent circumflexe T. It is going to be accent aigu. Why? Well, let's be honest. Do you really want to write circumflex that many times? I'm just saying. But otherwise, you just add the same endings. So, j'étais, tu étais, il était, nous étions, vous étiez, ils étaient. And there you go. Nice and easy. And of course, if you want to read more, here you go, dans le livre. Now, after we've talked about all this, I want you to take a moment to practice your endings. So we're going to do parle, which we talked about a couple of minutes ago. So take a moment to complete it and then double check your answers. All right, we're going to do the same with être now that you've done parler. So remember, nous étions, we make it an accent aigu instead. And then I want you to practice these endings real quick and then double check yourself just to make sure that you've got it. All right, feeling good about passing or imparfait? Excellent. That means it's time to move on to a new concept. And it's something that actually ties in very closely with what we've talked about before. Remember how we have les pronoms d'objet direct et indirect, which we talked about last week and have talked about in the past. Well, today we're going to talk about les pronoms accentués. Now, these are a little bit different because in English they're called stressed pronouns. And that doesn't mean that they're feeling very stressed out about life. Instead, They're usually used as the objects of prepositions, and they're also used for clarity and emphasis. Now, before you stress out about what that means and they make you a stressed pronoun, ha ha ha, you've actually seen them before, used for clarity on a very regular basis. So remember back a long time ago when I was teaching you jouer, to play something? Well, in that example, I probably used something like this. Monsieur Cannon et moi, nous aimons jouer aux jeux vidéo. So, Mr. Cannon and I, we like to play video games. Now, obviously, Monsieur Cannon et moi, it's not necessary in the sentence. After all, nous tells us who we're talking about. So really, I could take it out and say, je et Monsieur Cannon aimons jouer aux jeux vidéo. You know, something like that. But the thing is, the French don't really say that. It feels awkward. I mean, if you just listen to how I said it, it sounded awkward. So what they often do instead is tell you who they're talking about, then use the pronoun. So, Monsieur Cannon et moi, we are the nous in this situation. And so, I tell you who I'm talking about, and then I tell you who it is. Notice, though, that I used moi, which means me. Now, you know that from like Miss Piggy and the Muppets and things like that, and you've heard it other places too. But it's because it's a stressed pronoun. So to go over real quick, let's take a look at this chart over here. That looks terrible. Oh well. Le pronom sujet, which is the pronouns at the very beginning of the sentence, so that way we kind of know what's going on. So je becomes moi. Tu becomes toi. Il is Louis. Yes, we got Louis again. Elle stays Elle. Oh, thank God. On becomes soi. So notice moi, toi, soi. Nous stays nous because nous loves us. And the same with vous. Il becomes eux. And elle stays elle. So these are the different pronouns that you'll come across that will behave in a similar way. We have some more examples though, so let me show you those. Now some of these are things that you may have heard me say before, or they're not that familiar, but it'll make sense in just a moment. So here's how we use them. First off, you can use them as the object of a preposition. So, par exemple, nous allons travailler chez toi ce soir. We went to work at your house, or we're going to work at your house this evening. Chez in French is the house of or the office of someone, and so it's actually a preposition en français. So notice that because we have a preposition here, toi is ici, is right here. So chez toi, your house. Another example that you probably have heard before is après vous, after you, when you're opening a door or something like that. You could also say après toi if you wanted to go a little more informal. So, prepositions, you get to use these guys. Now, with a compound subject, it's just like what we were talking about. Just like what we were talking about earlier. So, Monsieur Cannon et moi, nous aimons jouer aux jeux vidéo. So you can do this for clarity and just, you know, to kind of tell people who the nous or the vous or the elle or whoever is. You can also use it with the subject pronouns to emphasize the subjects. So this is kind of for emphasis, ici, but you can also do it like this. Et lui écrit-il un roman? And him, he wrote a novel. So notice that we have il here. We know we're talking about guy, but they add this here to emphasize who it is that we're talking about. It's kind of like when we say something like, and you did that? You know, something like that. So anyways, Another way the French could use this is like this. Tu es brillant, toi. You are brilliant, you. Not necessarily something that we say in English, but it totally works in French. We can also use it after using c'est and être. So remember, c'est, c'est or ce sont, we can use after this guy. So imagine you're in the dark hallway, you hear a weird noise on campus, and you're like, c'est vous, Madame Stella? Is that you, Mrs. Stella? She would reply, oui, c'est moi. Yes, it's me. So notice we're using these guys over here. You can also use them in one-word answers, which is really handy. So, personne a faim? Is anyone hungry? Moi! Yeah, I am. And literally in English we'd say, me. So, yeah, you could totally use it like that. One last way that you can use it, it's really cool, is with the word même. This is même, not meme. I know. It looks like meme. It's really même, and it's basically the word for self en français. And you can use it for emphasis. So you know how you might say something like, I'm going to do it myself? Well, moi-même is the word they would use instead of myself. So, par exemple, j'ai lu le livre moi-même. I read the book myself. Boom. There you go. So if you want to add some attitude and emphasis, moi-même, or toi-même, yourself, or nous-mêmes, them, themselves, or ourselves, all that fun stuff. So you can use that in all kinds of different ways. So now that we've learned about les pronoms d'objet direct et indirect, I and on, and the stress pronouns, you've got to be wondering, all right, hold on. I'm noticing a pattern. All of them go between the subject and the verb. So how in the world are you supposed to know what order to put them in? I mean, we know I and all, it kind of sounds like a donkey because I always goes first and all goes second. But still, what are you supposed to do with the other ones? Well, the cool thing is, just like math, and for my math haters, don't worry, it's not that much like math, but for my math lovers, it is like math. There's an order of operations of where to put the pronouns so we know where they belong. Now, understanding this concept is important for better writing and speaking skills. Obviously, don't worry about completely stressing out about it and but I want you to know this because it'll help you out tremendously and because we're going to be practicing it this week. So, the things that always come first. Okay, so the subject is right here and the verb of the sentence is right here, okay? So, the first things that always would come is me, te, nous, and vous. Me, you, us, and you, basically. The second things are le, la, les. So, no matter if you have me and la, they're going to come in that order. Me, la. Next up we have lui et le, and it doesn't matter which way they're being used. Lui, le, they go here. And then I and on go closest to the verb. And remember, I always goes before on. So, yeah. Believe me, it'll make things a lot easier as you go along. So make sure that you review this. There's a picture of it on the ELC so that way you can easily check it out and keep it in mind. But go ahead and write it in your notes because this is a super handy thing to know. Now let's talk about how you actually use this. So here's a sentence. Madame Cannon lit Le Petit Prince à la classe. So Mrs. Cannon has been reading the Petit Prince or the Little Prince in class. Now, obviously, there are multiple ways that you can answer this, so I'm going to give you both answers. So, oui, elle, because of course we don't have to say Madame Cannon again. That's very redundant. Now, before we do that, Le Petit Prince is going to become what? It's going to become le. Direct object, it's le. La classe. Now, obviously, it could be they, but let's be honest, it's you guys that we're talking about. So you would say nous. She's been reading it to us. Nous. So, using the order of things that we've got over here, we know that nous is going to come before le in the order, because nous is ici and le is ici. So it would be oui, elle, nous, le, li. Yeah, I know that in English it's kind of confusing because it's like, wait, what? It doesn't matter where these were in the sentence originally? The answer is no, it doesn't really matter. The most important thing is where they go, as far as this order goes. Now, if you have ne and pas, remember ne is going to come before all of this, and then you'll have your verb. So, another way of saying it, non, elle ne nous lit pas, or I'm sorry, elle ne nous le lit pas. So no, she hasn't been reading it to us. See how that works though? Remember, the order of the words is the most important thing, not focusing on where they were in this sentence. All right, let's try another example. Madame Cannon a conduit la classe à Starbucks. So, have I taken the class to Starbucks? What? Okay, so the answer is totally no so far. So the answer would be non. And of course, we can do the same thing where Madame Cannon can become elle, since it's from your point of view. What's the next word? It's going to be ne. Now, before I get too far, la classe, who's that? That's right, it's nous. It's you guys again, us. How about a Starbucks? What does that become? Since it's a location, it's going to become E. Does that make sense? So, using what we know, nous, EIC, E, EIC, so non, elle, ne, nous, il a conduit, sorry, not the prettiest thing in the world, conduit pas. So literally, en anglais, it's no, she hasn't taken us there. She hasn't driven us there. So there you go. So you notice, like I said, it doesn't matter what order they're in, EC. What matters is what order they're supposed to come in, EC. Now I know that this can be kind of a challenging concept, which is why we're going to take some time with it. But if you have any questions about this or anything else that we've discussed today, or need any help, go ahead and email me. Madame Bush or Madame Richardson can give you an update on my availability. Hopefully by the time you see this, I'll be fairly available, but obviously it just depends on whether or not I'm currently in the hospital or not. So anyways, feel free to go ahead and email me questions. I'll get to them as soon as I can. And no worries, it's all going to be great. You're going to do a great job. So yeah, just a quick introduction and we'll continue to work on it. So, like I said, email me if you have any questions and I will see you guys soon. Bonne journée!